Hello and welcome to everyone out there in the Actual Tech Media audience. It's so great to have you on today's event. The topic of the event today is around configuration risk intelligence, how to de-risk your hybrid cloud. We want to give a special thanks to the sponsor of today's event, which are our friends over at Evolven. We're going to hear a great presentation as well as a really cool demo of the Evolven solution. So stay tuned for that. Before we get started, there's just a few things that you should know about today's event. I should mention my name is David Davis from Actual Tech Media, and I'm glad to be hosting the event today. As always, we want these events to be educational, and we encourage your questions on the event. We're going to be doing a live Q&A session, and experts from Evolven are standing by to answer your question during the event, during the demo. So keep those questions coming. And we even have a best question prize to maybe help shake some of those questions loose if you're not quite sure if you should ask. I'll talk about that more here in just a moment. But first, I want to call your attention there to the Handouts tab. It's there that you'll find a link to get started with Evolven. You can click on that link anytime during the event. That'll take you to the Evolven website. They've got tons of great resources on today's topic, and you can click there to request a demo as well. At the end of the event today, I'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card door prize. If you're watching this on demand, of course, that drawing would have already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found right there in the Handouts tab of your audience console. And then, as I mentioned, we also have a $50 gift card for our Best Question prize as well. We want these events to, help solve your challenges, and to help you to solve those challenges, we need your questions. We need to know what your challenges are and what you're dealing with out there in the world of technology. And that's the best way, honestly, to help, is to get your questions. And so the Best Question prize is designed to help do that. We'll be selecting the Best Question prize winner after the event and contacting them via email. All right, so with that housekeeping information out of the way, I'm excited now to bring in today's expert presenter. Welcome to Sasha Gillenson, founder and CEO of Evolven. Sasha, it's a pleasure to have you on the event. Thanks for being here. Take it away.
Thank you, Dave, and hello to everyone. As Dave said, I'm a CEO and founder of Evolven, and for the last 30 years, I have worked with enterprise IT organizations across various industries, trying to understand their challenges and coming up with technology solutions to help this organization to improve their stability, compliance, and security. And you can just see examples of the names I was working with. But there is one core challenge that I have observed for years, and that was, I'd say, recently even further exacerbated by the expanse of digital transformation. And I'm talking here about configuration, which is basically defined as the arrangement of IT infrastructure and applications making up business systems. As a configuration includes all the components of the infrastructure and software and parameters of the software components and infrastructure components, their attributes. But what I learned is that configuration is a risky business. And just look at the examples of various impacts that misconfigurations are made across enterprise and very large enterprise organizations. First of all, Forrester states that most security breaches happen because of misconfigurations. And it was a network configuration change that brought down WhatsApp and Instagram. Actually, there were multiple changes that brought them more than once, once a year ago, and there was just a recent outage in WhatsApp, again, because of the router configuration change. Research from VentureBeat shows that 81% of companies experience at least one outage because of expired certificates. And that's also my personal experience, and it supports this finding, because almost every customer I spoke with over the last few years mentioned certificate as one of the major pain points. Another statistic, this time from Gartner, states that configuration changes cause 85% of incidents, 85%. And let's not forget the scare and damage caused by Log4j vulnerabilities that took a lot of iterations and efforts last year and beginning of this year to remediate. And unsurprisingly, that various regulations and standards emphasize the adequate change in configuration control as a critical requirement. And again, personally, I see working with the customers a lot of internal organization where internal and external auditors prioritize this requirement, and it's in banking, energy, pharma, and other industries. Recently, we have observed growing convergence between development, operations, and security. It even gets a name, DevSecOps. And I will not dive into the reasons and the scope of this convergence, as this will require a whole other webinar that hopefully, like what I will say at another time. What's essential for our today's discussion is that configuration becomes a nexus of DevOps. All three groups or disciplines manipulate configurations and are impacted by configurations. Developers define, read, and modify application configuration. And sometimes they also touch application infrastructure configuration as well. Operations team, they work with infrastructure and application infrastructure configuration. DevOps team support all the above and also configurations of the engineering tools. Security teams manage access, permissions, privileges, and similar aspects, while also hardening application and infrastructure configurations. All these teams have different perspectives, and very frequently they use different tools, but they share configuration risks. And the mismatch by operations will threaten security. And if security put wrong permission on a folder, that can impact application availability of the applications that will be using this folder, for example, to publish reports. A wrong application setting can lead to overutilization of the server and impact operations. And at the same time, unauthorized changes, expired certificates, configuration drift can impact everything: stability, security, and compliance, development, operations, security, whole DevSecOps. And the bottom line is that converging development, operations, and security needs a single shared view into the end-to-end configuration. There should be a risk-based view allowing DevSecOps to mitigate the undesired impact of configuration setup and modification. So, well, the statement that visibility is critical to maintaining security and compliance, particularly, was confirmed in the recent research conducted by Cloud Security Alliance. When asked about the top challenges, 60% of the organizations participating in the research pointed to insufficient visibility into security and compliance gaps. And considering the high degree of dependency of these gaps on the configuration, going back to the quote by Forrester or Gartner, we can safely assume that the same percentage applies to the lack of visibility into the configuration. The examples of undesired impact I shared earlier shows that even the most mature and technology advanced organizations are affected by misconfigurations and changes. And the impact can be massive. It could be from system outages to security breaches impacting the customers, and very painful regulatory fines for non-compliance. But why it is so difficult to mitigate configuration risks? Right? If everyone, it's pretty obvious that the configuration risks are there, right? The configuration impacts multiple organizations. But why it's still happening? It happened, last year, it happens this year. And this happens first because today's enterprise environments and their configurations are very complex. Business services are spread across the hybrid cloud, including a mix of legacy on-premise technologies, private cloud, and public cloud. All these heterogeneous components are frequently interdependent. And so the configuration of one component can impact other components upstream and downstream. And as I already mentioned, the complexity is exacerbated by a variety of tools and perspectives utilized by each of the teams involved in the development, operation, and protection of the business services and their underlying infrastructure. The second is that configuration changes fast. Transition to automated agile processes, such as, for example, CI/CD, utilizing automated pipelines. This transition really accelerated the pace of changes drastically, making the control over the configuration and its changes struggle with the speed. And finally, configuration got a much more central role in enterprise IT environments. Today, configuration includes files and data sets and registries, configuration of the code artifacts, APIs, various application and infrastructure components. There are different versions. Modern systems highly depend on configurations that defines their deployment patterns, their physical architecture, their functionality. And due to the required flexibility, configuration became much more accessible and easier to modify. And as such, the risk of undesired configuration changes increased significantly. So, David, looks like we go to the poll time.
That's right. Yeah, I want to call everyone's attention to a poll on the screen right here. It says, to what degree do you believe configuration and change create risk to enterprise stability, security, and compliance? And so we want to get your feedback on this. Is it, in your opinion, not at all? Is it some, high, or critical? And so I see a few responses coming in. Thank you for those. Let's get a few more. And I will share the feedback with everyone out here, and you can see, how you stack up with your peers on the webinar today. All right, we've got some good responses coming in. Thank you for those. Let me go ahead and share the feedback, share the results. And it looks like 36% said high, 29% said critical, 29% said some, and some 4% out there said not at all. What's your take on the results there, Sasha?
Yeah, it's as expected, right? And I'm very glad, right, that I didn't miss a point. That the audience agrees with me.
Excellent, excellent, yeah.
All right, so that's very helpful to verify that we are in the same boat. So let me jump to the next slide. And actually, it's easy to guess that when I spoke about the challenges of mitigating configuration risks, I already had a solution in mind. And the solutions that my team and I believe can effectively mitigate stability, compliance, and security risks, all triggered by misconfiguration changes, the solution is configuration risk intelligence. And it relies on 4 key dimensions. First and foremost, as the name suggests, you must have the right configuration data to provide visibility and identify configuration risks. And what does it mean, the right configuration data? It's end-to-end data. You must see everything. Legacy technologies, modern applications running on-premise, in the private or public cloud. Most granular data. Even a tiny misconfiguration of a single configuration parameter can take a system down or open it to a security breach. Take, for example, just one parameter, application parameter defining a connection string to a database, like what damage a misconfiguration can cause. So you need to know your configuration down to individual parameters. That's how granular the data should be. Fresh, up-to-date data. It will not help you much if your picture of the environment configuration state is from a week ago. A lot could change in a week, and including new misconfigurations and risk being introduced as part of planned or maybe unplanned updates. But having the data is not enough. Imagine you see the entire end-to-end granular configuration of your critical business service. It could be hundreds, if not thousands of components, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of configuration parameters. How would you identify the risks? The solution mitigating risks needs to find and to highlight these risks, right? It should provide insights. It could be insights generated by automated analytics. It could be insight based on the organization's best practices and knowledge, or even insights, from data slicing and dicing led by subject matter experts. But there should be insights that will make the data actionable. Relying on these 4 dimensions of the right data and insights, configuration risk intelligence looks into the current and historical configuration states. What's also very important, it looks into configuration evolution as a form of changes. Why is it important to combine configuration and changes? It is important because changes add risk perspectives not available only to look into static configuration state. I'll give you an example. Unauthorized change. Maybe unauthorized change actually updates parameter to good value, but still it breaks the process, introduces security risk, and introduces compliance risk. Anyway, configuration risk intelligence starts with identifying all the assets and collecting their granular configuration. Once the data is collected, configurations are baselined, and golden baselines are either automatically captured or could be defined by subject matter experts. From that point, configuration risk intelligence repeatedly verifies the configuration state by reassessing configuration risks, checking the configurations against target policies, ensuring consistency of configuration, and looking for vulnerabilities. It continuously monitors configuration to detect changes and deviations from the baselines. When changes are detected, they are correlated with all the available data sources, including the ones collected by us, by Evolven, for example, but also others available through a plethora of external tools. The risk of the changes in baselines deviation is analyzed to identify those changes and deviations that can negatively impact the stability, compliance, and security of the business applications you manage and underlying environments. When the risk is identified, obviously the action should be taken. And the identified risk could be addressed by remediation of the changes, modification of configurations, or also by inputs of fine-tuning configuration collection and analysis. So you can say, this data, this analysis need to be optimized. So now that we discussed the conceptual approach of configuration risk intelligence, mitigating configuration risk, I would like to introduce our Evolven technology that implements this approach. And I'll start with discovery and collection, because they are foundation of our technology that implements the key principles of configuration risk intelligence that I mentioned, such as data completeness, granularity, and freshness. It is also important to mention that our collection minimizes any overheads to the monitor environments and protects them, allowing users to control the amount of resources such as CPU, for example, memory, disk, and so on, consumed by Evolven when collecting the data. And obviously, this is also a very important aspect, how technology gets the data, because you don't want this collection of the data, retrieval of the data, that impacts the environment that you want to protect. The insights into the configuration data and also into changes are provided by a set of capabilities in our platform that include very powerful UI-based search, very flexible policies, and also patented AI-based risk analytics, right? The analytics that estimates the risk of configurations and the changes to the configurations. And also integrations with existing tool sets that allow us to correlate configuration and detected changes with important contextual data. So for example, we can correlate detected changes with change requests in the service desk, and this way highlight unauthorized changes. Or another example could be a correlation of detected changes with alerts as a performance monitoring tools. And this way we can shortlist potential root cause for this alert that is investigated. Having the platform capabilities, Evolven supports two main categories of use cases. The first one is asset management for DevSecOps. That's where we collect, verify, and monitor assets in their detailed configuration. We manage alignment of the assets to the defined configuration baselines. We verify policies. We detect expired and invalid certificates. We identify components recorded as vulnerable in the National Database of Vulnerabilities. We highlight components not protected by the security software, such as, for example, antivirus. And that's just examples of the use cases that are based, again, on these capabilities in the platforms that I presented before. So the second category of the use cases addresses risk introduced by changes that modify monitoring configuration. This use cases includes the detection of unauthorized changes that are not approved by change requests in the service desk, or some form of approved automated deployments. Evolven integrates an additional gateway into CI/CD pipelines to assess risks in the deployed configuration and changes going through the pipeline. We detect inconsistencies within and across multiple environments, monitor file integrity, automate root cause analysis by correlating changes to investigate issues, and so on. And again, it's just to give you the sense of what you can do with Evolven, again, with all its capabilities. Evolven integrates its technology with existing enterprise IT processes and tools, to add a single pane of glass into configuration and changes, to automate configuration risk analysis. But what's important for us, we don't need to re-engineer the existing practices. That's why we connect to them in such a way that we enrich, we add additional capabilities, we protect, we optimize, we automate this process, but we don't need to re-engineer them. So how Evolven is different? Like, what is special about Evolven? So first of all, it's a powerful change detection, because it's important to provide, as I mentioned, a unified view of what your configuration looks like, what is the history of your configuration, and what are the changes that happened in this configuration. And we see various tools that try to attack, the change angle, the configuration angle. But again, I believe that it's important to see both, because both perspectives give you the full picture. Risk analysis, risk analytics. There is a lot of data out there. Like, if you start collecting the data, end-to-end data, the granular level, up to date, you will see a lot of changes. You will see a lot of configuration parameters and different sources, like different types of configuration. So manually getting, making sense out of this data is almost, practically impossible or very expensive. So you need to have automated analytics, and we have 7 patents for our analytics engine that combines machine learning algorithms, heuristics, statistics, to identify and highlight this risky configuration and risky changes. Discovery. Again, there is plenty of tools collecting information about the environment, but how do you collect environment, this information end to end very frequently, at the level of near real time, very flexibly, so that you can actually control how and what you are collecting to the depths, as I said, to the depths of the digital parameters, and also what is super critical with low overhead. Because if you collect, in depth and frequently, how do you ensure that you do not hurt resources of the system that you are collecting information from? Granularity is essential, because if you say that, okay, I have 10 files in my application, that's not very helpful, right? My configuration, was changed. What does it mean the file was changed? How can you analyze that? Again, you need to understand what is a specific configuration parameter, configuration element at this granular level that was updated. You need to know the asset components down to the granular level. Only this way, again, you can protect and manage your environment. And again, there are solutions that are targeting operations. There are solutions that are targeting compliance. There are solutions targeting security. But as I said already, right, the impact is shared. The risks are shared. And we are Evolven as a single platform that provides configuration risk intelligence for security, for compliance, and for operations, all in one platform. So when considering the configuration risk intelligence approach and technology, a frequent question I get from the customer is if it fits their organization's maturity. And my experience is that configuration risk intelligence can help mitigate risks to any organization, from a very immature one running purely manual idle process to organizations that implemented zero-touch, auto-scaling, self-healing cloud environments. The use cases would change, as the focus would shift to different types of risk. However, the configuration risks will remain whatever maturity is there, and the need to address them is not eliminated. It's not eliminated by CI/CD pipelines, by automated deployments, by microservice architecture. Again, we work with this type of organizations, as the configuration risks are there. All right, Dave, looks like it's time for another poll.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. We want to know from everyone out there in the audience, where do you feel that your company fits today when it comes to its change and configuration process maturity level? How mature is your company when it comes to change and configuration processes? We're talking here about, using configuration management to reduce risk. And I'm curious the results of this one, what it's going to say. How many folks out there really are in desperate need, or maybe even just some need of this sort of configuration management? And I bet there's a lot of folks that needed and maybe might not have even thought about it up until now. So thank you everyone for your responses there. Let me go ahead and share the results. And it looks like 36% said maturing. That was kind of the leader, but it's relatively evenly spread across traditional and modern. 10% said future. Sasha, what do you think?
I think it's very representative of what we see also, like other resources show in terms of state of the digital transformation, right? And now, there are some companies that started early and now are very advanced. That are some companies that are maturing right now. There are companies that are preparing themselves. So I would say that this distribution kind of reflects the state of the digital transformation that I see in the market. It's very, very interesting.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to see the Evolven solution in action. Can you show us a demo?
Yeah, let's start with a demo. And for that, I will need to share my screen. And Dave, I will check on you if you can see the browser that I'm sharing.
Yes, sir. I see it. Looks good.
All right. So before I jump into the use cases and that I was showing in the slides before, I would like to start with the data that we are collecting. As I mentioned, the data is a foundation of all the use cases. Foundation for analysis. It's also a foundation for other capabilities translating into asset management and change risk analysis use cases. So what we see here is an inventory module of Evolven. And we talked about, first, we talked about the need to collect end-to-end configuration. So what you see here in Evolven is examples of different components, right? Identified, automatically discovered by Evolven in AWS, and different types of databases, for example, running on-premise, Kubernetes configuration, Linux, example of a Linux machine, examples of various middleware servers, MQ, network devices, on-premise infrastructure, devices, Windows virtual machine, and so on. This is just to show you the spectrum. And now for each component in the spectrum, the level of the information that we go to, right, includes, let's start with something more modern as a Kubernetes. And we'll essentially, see the namespaces, the config maps and secrets for this namespaces, the deployments, Kubernetes deployments. Whoever is familiar with Kubernetes, I'm sure will recognize, the Kubernetes language. The services all the way down to the pods, to the containers, Docker images used to instantiate, running containers, and will essentially parse, as we discussed, configuration, identify configuration, parse it down to individual parameters, as well, as capture, other components, software components of the image. There is no sense to parse, the executable files, so we'll check some version them so that we can identify the change at the level of the executable. And if Evolven, and I will show this is integrated to CI/CD pipeline, will be able to go down and see the code that was created and updated to generate, to build this executable software components. And for each of the layers, Evolven will collect, all the detailed configuration, right? And as I mentioned, there could be hundreds, and thousands of parameters just for one of the components. So if you look, into we work with the customers that runs, tens of thousands of nodes and hundreds of thousands of containers on these nodes, and there will be a lot of configuration out there. And the same level of details, we looked at the details in the modern environment like Kubernetes, but the same level of details, we'll see at, something like Tomcat, for example. We'll see the Tomcat structure, the server instances down to the Java applications. And we'll see the configuration files which are parsed. We'll see manifests of files, of Warren jar files that we have detected, and we'll actually see the, down to again the all the jars that comprise, or all the files actually that comprise the jar, same level of details will be available for configuration at the server level. Okay, so that's the idea here. And again, I can spend a lot of time going into details, but just wanted to show you that how detailed this information is, and how diverse it is, covering on-premise and cloud implementations, and legacy and modern technologies. And this information could be, again, as I mentioned, collected in near real time on the high frequency. You control, the frequency. Evolven could be also integrated in your existing deployment system. So actually, collection will be initiated by the deployments, and you can, collect information from, once an hour to once every few minutes to ensure that it is fresh. Or like again in cloud and containerized environments, we can be updated about the changes by the system, as that will trigger the collections once the change is reported by such a platform, like for example OpenShift, Kubernetes, Tanzu, and so on. So now that we have all this data, what can we do with it, right? And first of all, I would like to show the assets dashboard. And this example, again, is highly customizable. You can actually break, again, slice and dice the data and calculate the KPIs that you need. But speaking about the single pane of glass across the hybrid cloud, we see here on-premise assets and cloud assets. And we see Windows machines and Linux machines and databases and middleware servers on one hand. On the other hand, we can see that, for example, for our front-end systems, we can see the EC2 instances. They use the IAM roles as Lambda functions, the S3 volumes, and so on. And we can go down and see like what versions of Windows and Linux we're running here, what types of database and application servers are there, what sizes and types of EC2 instances we have, which of IAM users, with full access we have here, what kind of Lambdas, what kind of runtime technologies used, like Node.js or Python, and so on. And if you want to see the details, okay, I have 750 Microsoft SQL databases, so I can actually jump and see the databases. What are the versions, when this asset were created, and updated, where they are running actually, like, what are the names of these database servers, where they are running, and so on. Again, this information provided here in dashboard, but it also could be provided in reports. You can create alerts on certain conditions where certain types of assets are created or modified. You also, Evolven supports, provides, very extensive REST API. So this data could also be exchanged with any other systems that you are using for service management, configuration management, change management, and so on. As the information, like again, its integration is easy, based on the APIs, on available APIs and existing integration connectors. So first of all, we have the view in the assets, but then one of the things we can see, as we said, we can verify that this asset actually match specific policy. So another view can show you, in this case, like, for multi-cloud environment, again, different views on the compliance to the policies defined for these types of environments and for these types of assets. So we can see that there are various specific compliance KPIs, like for example CIS benchmark, some specific security policies, cost control policies, stability policies, and so on. And we can see examples of the policies, like for example for Azure, addressing performance, compliance, cost, and so on, or for example for VMware Tanzu as a containerization platform. And you can see easily the policy, the detailed. It's we want to ensure that we upgrade only one instance per canary release. So if we are actually executing canary type of releases in our platform, VMware Tanzu specifically can control how release is executed. And we look for various applications, and we see that 20 of this application are matching this criteria, and one is failed. So let's see why it failed. We can see that the application Forge Rock Broker and dev environment has failed. Why it has failed? Let's see the details. We see that the value is 2, while actually the condition for this particular parameter defining the number of canary instances was defined by the rule as lower or equals to 1. So obviously 2 is greater than 1, and the application fails the policy. Evolven will also automatically identify, as I mentioned, failed certificates, right? Another view, another perspective on the assets and their configuration. We can actually, Evolven can identify certificates that are already expired, that will be expiring in some time, like for example, in 3 months. And we can actually break it down again by environments. We can see if there are any risky updates on certificate has happened, like for example, the changes that invalidate the certificate. We can see where specifically the certificates are located. Essentially, the way Evolven identifies certificates, it scans the file systems, and for the different types of the certificates, it goes to Windows trust stores and any other areas, or technologies where certificates could be extracted. Like for example, Palo Alto load balancer or F5 load balancer certificates could be extracted, through extractable through APIs. So Evolven will use APIs to pull this information. But the bottom line is that we'll collect all this, we'll discover all the certificates, only tracking them to ensure that, again, that will alert you before they expire. And again, this information is provided here as dashboard, but it could be reported, it could be alerted, it could be fed into your systems. Like, for example, some of our customers automatically create a ticket in Service Desk, like for example in Jira or in ServiceNow, whenever a certificate is going to expire, so that the relevant team will take care of this ticket and will renew or update certificate. So we also want to monitor and verify that the environment doesn't drift from the defined baselines. In this example, the dashboard shows a drift for last week for the application, a specific application called on-demand loans. You can actually roll up, obviously, all this information into the statistics and details per environment, type of technology, business server, set of applications, entire data center, entire cloud account, and so on. This again, just example of data per application, where again you can see the drift is prioritized based on the risk analysis executed by our analytics engine. Risk is broken down by different technologies, the impact areas of the drift, again estimated by our risk analysis. And you can also see like what kind of drift happened. You'll see drifts that happen in the software components in their code, as well as drift in configuration that can impact different aspects of your environment. A perspective, a deeper perspective that you can set up is, for example, looking at the kind of a whole range of configuration change related KPIs across all of your applications, right? And I showed you the drift per application, but if I want to see more than just drift, right? I have here in this dashboard a set of applications. Because it's a demo, there are only 6 applications. They're presented as tabs, and at the same time, you can essentially, if you will have hundreds of applications, it will be arranged obviously in the list. And for each of the applications, the color, the green, orange, red, is defined by the state of the KPIs calculated based on the findings, on the insights for the configuration and changes detected for each of these applications. So, for example, we've already talked about application on-demand loans. You can see if are there any unauthorized changes, Are there any deployments failing or introducing risks? Are there any high-risk changes identified as such by our analytic engines? Is the environment itself, production environment, consistent? Are there any security changes? Are there any changes in particular in the backend, in the database? And again, just examples of the different KPIs you can set up for your application, for the set of applications, or each individually. But you can organize your view, again, as dashboard, report, or an export of the data based on the KPIs that are important for you, for your organization, your team, or your set of application. And obviously, once you see the red indicator, or you get like a report with information indicating red, you can see the details and understand like what are the risks in my environment. So we saw that there were 16 risky changes. What are they? Let's look by different type of the technologies. As this is a traditional technology, so we'll see that there are risky changes in certificates, in IIS, web server, Microsoft SQL, Tomcat, Windows. Obviously, this application is running on top of Windows. On the right side, you will see the automatic breakdowns created by our analytics, so you can slice and dice the data without going into the details. But there are not so many changes, so I want to see like why I have risky changes in Windows. And what I see here is that firewall, Windows firewall configuration was changed. And we can see the details. Remember, I talked about the granularity of the data. We can see specific parameters that were updated. And we can see that, for example, the last change, a parameter allow redirect was updated true. What was the previous value? It was false. When it happened on 24th of November. What happened? We see that there are 4 boxes in the consistency column. And one of the boxes is red. Each box reproduces comparable servers or resources. And we see that one is red, so configuration on one of the servers drifted from the others. So when we look at the risk, like why Evolven decided that it's risky, our risk essentially engine estimated that is like in this case this item was consistent before and now it is not. So that's triggered actually the definition, identification of this change, of this particular change as a high risk. A different perspective could be provided for organizations for a more like like a transformed organization implementing CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery, implementing the pipelines. So yet another view, if you remember, one of the use cases that I have mentioned was adding risk gateway to CI/CD pipeline. So it's another perspective, collecting the same information, but another perspective. And this perspective is the DevOps dashboard, right? Here the data about the configuration and changes organized around the pipelines. So you can see that you have 2 pipelines for backend and frontend, and different services are actually built and delivered through this different pipelines. You can see for each, in this case, microservice, what is the version, what is the build, right, and how is it progressing across the pipeline. You can see the changes introduced in each step, and we can see that, for example, an integration test step of Enlight server, 5 risky changes were detected. We also can see that this pipeline failed certain configuration checks, failed certain policies, right? And we can, as usual, drill down and see like what are these risky changes. So, for example, we can look at the perspective of the risky changes and see that there is a split by configuration and code. We can see that in configuration, some memory parameter of Kubernetes container was actually decreased. And we can see also the changes, like we said, there could be deviation, a change in the code. The code is part, the software component, and it's called part of the configuration. And we see that there were also 4 risky changes on the code side. And we can see why they were risky. As I mentioned, on the right side, you see Evolven kind of breaking down the data and showing you like also the insights. And the insights here will be that there are changes with frequent test failures. So someone made a change, a developer made a change, tried to test it, and it came back because it failed the test several times. And there are packets changed by new developers. So some code that typically is managed by other developers was updated by developers that is not familiar with the code. And also we can see that there was some critical functionality impact. Again, my point here is that once you have the right data, once the data is extensive, complete, granular, and fresh, a lot of use cases could be executed to manage configuration and your assets on one hand, and at the same time to watch your changes, assess the risk, and prevent the issues, stability, compliance, and security issues caused by these changes. And the last part that I would like to show is that once you have this data, on top of automatic analysis and policy-based verification, and just a single pane of glass allows you to provide, let's just switch the search, provide you a repository where you can run a complicated queries, giving you essentially both understanding of your environment and also helping you to identify the issues that are hidden in your assets. I'll give you an example. We're looking to the search module, and as I mentioned, we have powerful UI-based search. And I just want to show you a couple of examples of the searches. What can you do? So I prepared a couple of the searches, like for example, identify all Java deployments, right? So I just run, a search that says look for installed products, called Java, because that's typically how Java is called. And again, you can use different ways to identify Java, looking for JVMs. In this case, we went under, the installed products, and show me the products that their version is less than 1.8, where these are outdated, versions of Java that have stability and security issues. And typically, this is not, any regulation will require you to update this old. Or any compliance standard will require you to update this old version of Java. And we can see actually where these old Javas are deployed, on which servers, right? And what kinds of Javas are deployed there. And another example would be, in cloud environment, right? So yes, you have AWS tools, right? AWS console, but I have thousands and thousands of AWS instances. I just simply want to know what's the how many large instances I have actively running. Why? Because it's something that can impact the cost, and I might be a person that doesn't have access to AWS console. I may be a person that's responsible for managing a mixed environment, so I don't have a knowledge of each particular tool. Here's one tool that will show you this information in a very simple query. Another one could be again, very simple question, like what versions of IIS I have actually in my environment. A very simple question as well. I'll say, hey, what are the, most of all I have 7.5 version of IIS, pretty outdated, and I actually moved only one server, one instance of IIS was moved to version 10. And so that's example again that in addition to automated analysis, what can you do when you have deep, extensive data and a powerful way to define search without knowing how to script, or how to develop, and also how to manage a variety of different tools, each appropriate, for each technology, one for Windows, one for Linux, one for AWS, one for Azure, and so on. A single pane of glass. And I will pause here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Amazing demo.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking time to demo the product for us. I mean, that is just so cool and so powerful. I know this could help a lot of companies out there to, be more secure, prevent these kind of misconfigurations before they happen, because so many of these malicious attacks we see in the news start off as misconfigurations that people just didn't know anything about. So This could be a huge help to a lot of companies. I want to call everyone's attention to the poll on the screen. We want to get your feedback on this. What would you like next? What's your next step when it comes to configuration management? Would you like a personal demo of the Evolven solution where you can ask all the questions you want? Would you like to hear about how other customers like you use Evolven? Or would you like a brief on AI and configuration risk that goes into more detail? We want to get your feedback. Feel free to select one or multiple options there on the poll, and we'll leave that up while we take your questions. So lots of questions have been coming in here during the event. I'm going to go ahead and start with this one that looks good. Sasha, they say we already have an asset management tool, ITSM tools, etc. How would Evolven fit into this existing tool set, and can it replace some or all of these existing tools?
So it is a good question, and obviously the question of replacement depends on the tool, right? And what use cases you are implementing with this tool. But as an example, I would say 90% of our customers today are using both ServiceNow and Evolven. And the way they're doing this is that they keep information on the assets, kind of core information on the assets in ServiceNow, and Evolven provides additional granular information about the detailed configuration of the assets and their composition. Also, because of the frequency of the update, of having up-to-date information, Evolven also is used to kind of refresh the data if it's not refreshed by ServiceNow. So it's a federation of the sources in case of ServiceNow. And why is it doing ServiceNow? Because this data is also linked in ServiceNow to other processes, right? At the same time, we have customers that use the tools where they just simply, they don't run the ITSM processes, but simply collect information about the assets and their core configuration, and nothing more, right? And basic management. And with this, use case, we have customers that replaced these tools with Evolven because it gives much more granular, extensive view with all the capabilities on top of the data that we are collecting.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, thank you for explaining that. Here's another one. They want to know, how is this different from what AWS does to detect changes in configuration?
Right. So again, excellent question. And I assume that the question is about AWS config. And AWS config does a good job on collecting information about the changes within the configuration resources. It doesn't really provide a complete picture of the changes inside, for example, compute instances, EC2 instances, if they are running legacy technologies. So if you're running Windows and Tomcat and so on and so on within EC2 on AWS, like for example, result of lift and shift migration, this sort of information will get there. But what Evolven does on top of it, it actually gives you ability to analyze the changes. As I mentioned, the fact that environment is changing all the time. You'll have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of changes. What do you do with them, right? It's just too much information. You need to be able to analyze that. So AWS uses applies a set of policies based on their best practices, saying that this configuration is within policy or not. But sometimes, again, the change could be, and configuration could be within policy and still represent a risk for the particular application, particular environment. And that's additional risk analysis plus combination, taking this data and connecting it into a single pane of glass, as I showed, with on-premise. That's the added value that, not counting again, a lot of different capabilities that I was showing, but just a single pane of glass for hybrid cloud and automated risk analysis on top of the configuration and changes. That's just a few kind of big examples of what we will add to AWS config.
That's great because, like you said, a list of changes isn't going to be very helpful. You need that analysis, you need that intelligence on top of it, and it sounds like that's what Evolven can provide. Next question here, they say the idea of CI/CD pipeline is to mitigate risk by integrating testing, security checks, etc. What does Evolven add on top of the common CI/CD pipeline steps?
Yeah, so what we see, and it's true, right? The whole idea of CI/CD pipeline is to automate, right, this risk mitigation. But what we see, like what today exists in the pipeline are, the vulnerability scans, the static code analysis, the automated testing tools. It still doesn't tell you like what the risk is, like what the overall risk is. Because like, in the pre-CI/CD pipeline times, when you were running, ITIL change management process, you would have a cub that would be sitting and looking into the change and trying to estimate, how risky it is, like what will be the impact, do the people that plan the change, actually know what they are doing and so on. And you cannot do this in CI/CD because the changes are too small, too fast. You can put, a person on each of the changes. So think about Evolven in this case, like as an automated cub, right? Someone is a risk again analytics engine that sits on top, looking into the actual change values and the metadata of the pipeline, and saying, hey, out of this deployment, you have two changes you need to take a look, like an example I showed, right? Because frequent test failures, and at the same time, a very big code update, and at the same time, you also touched, configuration, making it completely anomalous, right? So that kind of analysis doesn't exist today in the pipelines, and this adds this risk gateway, right? That ensures that even if the person doesn't look at every changes, there is a machine that verifies the risk for each and every change that goes through the pipeline.
Got it. Yeah, that's smart. Verifying that risk at each step. Another good one here, they want to know, what are the risks and challenges in adopting cloud services?
So that's a big question. That's something, I would probably table, because this is like a separate webinar.
Right.
Because when cloud services are supposed, to solve a lot of these challenges, right? It's automation, right? Its ability to auto-scale and self-heal environment. But at the same time, kind of you lose at some point kind of control for your environment. You have a machine, managing, what the state of the environment is, and if something happens, how do you know actually what the state was, and how do you easily understand, how the evolution of your environment led to the issue, led to the problem. But it's just like one of the aspects of the risks. So again, it's like, it could be, we can do another webinar just about the risks of cloud services.
Absolutely, yeah. But you make a great point there, that risk of losing control and not knowing what's happening in the cloud, especially around configurations, can be very scary and problematic. Let's see, Rob is asking, how does Evolven monitor, alert, and remediate end-to-end connection status across a variety of connections and connections for both on-prem and hybrid endpoints?
I probably will need, like, again, to have a more specific conversation with them to understand like what it means. I would assume that, like, the question is about topology. If there are complex topologies, how do you ensure that relationships, right? And I think the connection mean here relationship. And Evolven has a number of methods, right, in order to track these relationships. We can rely on existing monitoring tools like performance monitoring tools, or observability tools to get information from them. We do integrate, with service mapping tools to get information there as well. You can also define this topology within Evolven, and will automatically do the mapping within the cloud as well. So there are different methods how to deal with that. One thing, to kind of upfront to state clearly, Evolven is not like, the application dependency mapping tool. That's not, right? Again, we bring this information, we can generate information, but we're not competing in the service mapping space.
Got it. Okay. Well, I just realized we've reached the top of our webinar slot here, our schedule. Last question I wanted to ask you, Sasha, before you go is, what should folks do to get started? If this topic resonates with them, folks are struggling with configuration management, what's the next step they should take?
So, if they want to proceed, like, to explore this area with Evolven, just reach out to us through our website. There is the ability to request, the meetings, the demo, and there is also the contact information, and we'll set a more detailed call focusing specifically on the needs and requirements of of the particular organization that wants to talk to us.
Excellent.
And
Yeah.
our web, just to maybe mention, our website is www.evolven.com, as simple as that.
Excellent. And I encourage everyone there to respond to the poll as well. If you'd like to get your own personalized demo of the Evolven solution, get all your questions answered, see how this could help you with your challenges, check the box there on the poll. So Sasha, it's been great having you on the event today. Thank you so much for the excellent presentation and demo.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for an opportunity to present the solution.
Absolutely. And I encourage everyone to check out the handouts tab. There's also a link there to get started with Evolven. All right, I'll leave the poll up for anyone who hasn't answered it. Now's the time to do it while I announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card on the live event today. This is going out to Alex Alzano from California. Alex Alzano from California will reach out to you to deliver that gift card, and we'll also be reaching out to our best question prize winner as well. Thank you to everyone who joined the webinar today. I hope you learned a lot and have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.